The only thing that I'm not seeing is the video, right? Yep.
Okay, we're going to start off with you, Peter.
All right. You can open it up.
Yeah, good evening. I'd like to introduce you all to the council workshop, April 9th, 2020. Thank you all very much for joining. And right now I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, Peter Creighton, who will go through our budget presentations fiscal year 21. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. Your families are well. The Assistant City Manager, Phil Kroll, is going to assist me with the presentation. Thank you very much, Phil. So what I'm presenting tonight is the manager's proposed CIP for FY21. I'll be giving you what I'm going to call a 30,000-foot overview, because you'll be hearing from the department heads beginning this evening who have CIP items, and they'll be able to get into more of the detail. I'll talk about some of it, but they'll be able to get into more detail with you, and you can ask questions, of course. As you know, where we're starting as a city government at this point in time is a net increase of 78,000 on the budget for the city, including the CIP that's being proposed. That represents a 4-cent increase on the mill rate. I will say this, though, things are subject to change, as we all know, because of what's happening with the pandemic and its impact on the economy. We're monitoring our revenues very closely. We have estimated our revenues conservatively, but we are continuing to do that. We'll report on that as we go forward, because that's obviously very important to this budget and your decision that you're going to make on the adoption of the budget. Appreciate your attention and your involvement as elected officials. You are the board of directors for the city government. We have a strong team of department heads, as you all know, who are experts in their own fields. And we look forward to having the presentations with you and answering your questions and talking about how do we best position the city as we go forward. My goal and objective, and I think the assistant city manager certainly shares this with me, is to ensure the continuity of operations for city government and to have us be in the best position when the virus goes away, to prepare us for the recovery. And we have a recovery team that we're starting to put together, which we'll talk about more in the future. I have been talking with Phil about that and asked Mark Goslin to head that up. And we will be reporting on that as we move forward. Phil, if you want to show the next slide. So the long-term goals, as we've talked about many times, are to make Auburn one of the best small cities in America. Our strategic planning process has identified recommendations that will help us accomplish that goal. I've talked about this when I presented the 5-year CIP and how those goals intersect, connect with the CIP and our strategic planning recommendations. In terms of long-term goals that came out of the strategic plan, there are 11 that came out as high priorities from the Strategic Planning Committee. Protect and enjoy natural resources, protect all bodies of water, downtown management district, Great Falls being part of that, define and promote industry clusters, public service and infrastructure needs, neighborhood definition, rehabilitation, beautification, prioritize transportation and connectivity, image of schools and the value of education, and finally, pedestrian environment, having a pedestrian-friendly community, in other words, and communications plan, and then arts, history, culture, recreation, and entertainment. I will speak about how the CIP items that I am recommending connect with those strategic plan recommendations. We have a bond rating right now that is very good. It's AA3. Our outstanding debt in FY 07-08 was over $70 million. Through good financial management and the leadership of the past mayors and councils, we've been able to bring that down to almost $57 million. That, of course, helps position us for taking on the debt of the new high school and the other items that we need to do as a city. In terms of the requested CIP for FY21 and the debt retirement, the city department request, it came from the department heads. And when I asked them to put their request together, I asked them to look at what they thought were the needs of their department and the city. And the request came to almost 16 million. And the school department request is an additional almost 1.4 million. My recommendation on the city side is 8.5 million. And the recommendation they have for the school system is 1 million. The debt retirement for FY21 is actually 9.1 million, not 9.5 million. That's my error. I just want to correct that. I think, and I knew that number when I made my final recommendations. What typically happens with our CIP items, as much as we may try, because of situations that happen, what is approved by the council in a given year isn't always spent because of unforeseen circumstances or changes that happen. So I'm comfortable with having the debt retirement be at 9.1 million for FY21. We're positioned well. The bond rating from our financial advisor for 10 years is 2.5% interest. Most of our CIP items are 10 years. Jill can talk more about that when she speaks regarding finances of the city later this evening. One of the recommendations is Union Street Park, Chestnut Street Park upgrades for $75,000 bonding. That's, I would say, to protect and enjoy the natural resources that the city has. That's the only item that comes under that particular strategic plan recommendation for FY21. For the downtown, there is the New Village Center revitalization. Right now, we have a balance of $469,000 of unspent funds. So this $100,000 would give us $569,000. That is an important project. That's been a long-term project of the city. There are a number of things that we still need to do to complete that project. I think the 569,000 will take us a long ways. Michael can speak about that, Michael Chamings, later this evening when he gives his presentation on Economic Community Development Department. Great Falls Plaza redevelopment, there's 100,000 bonding that I'm recommending. There is currently 100,000. The approach that we're taking is we're trying to work collaboratively with the developer, Tom Platts, who has a lot of the property in that area. And he is interested in partnering with us, working with us. We don't have a plan as yet. So the money that we're putting in is to help us prepare that, to work in conjunction with Tom to do a redevelopment of the Great Falls Plaza. Downtown parking walkability, there's 270,000 from TIF and CDBG funds. That will, of course, enhance the ability of people to be able to walk in the downtown and also will improve parking. The Festival Plaza fountain system removal. The current fountain that we have, as I think you may all know, is not working properly. It's a maintenance nightmare, unfortunately. And we have found that we're not able to get the parts necessarily that we need. We can discuss this further. Derek Belanger, who is our facilities coordinator as well as purchasing agent, will be presenting later this evening under facilities, and he can talk more about it. But we're recommending that we remove it, that maybe we even look at moving the stage that we currently have for the band that plays there during the summer band concerts. And we think that would be an enhancement to that Festival Plaza. Under public service and infrastructure needs, there are, I think, 28 items that come under this strategic plan recommendation out of the strategic plan. One is security access control, and you'll hear a report on that during the budget presentations. Our safety coordinator, Matt Fifield, has worked in collaboration in conjunction with the police chief and a team of people to look at security issues that we have in our facilities and in our buildings. The problems that we have are important and serious issues that we need to address to make our employees safer. Then we have the public safety facility study. As you will recall, there was money that was put in the budget to make some renovations to the police department, which is housed at City Hall. My recommendation was, instead of spending that money, knowing that we probably need a long-term strategy for a new public safety building, that we reallocate those funds, that we don't spend them on the renovations to the police department and the locker room area and some of the other issues, that we take that money and we form a building committee with people from the community and staffed by city staff to take the information that has been worked on and developed and to do a review and come back with a recommendation and report to the city council. You'll hear more about this during the budget workshops coming up. And then there's parking enforcement software of 30,000, and then police vehicle replacement of 212,000. The police chief will talk about this. We are on a schedule of replacement of police vehicles, and this is consistent with that schedule. Again, I would ask you to listen to what the department heads have to say, ask the questions, and then it's, of course, your prerogative to make the decision on the final adoption of the CIP. Lewiston-Auburn 911 study. As you know, I have put forward a proposal to the city of Lewiston, the city administrator, specifically Ed Barrett, regarding the funding method that has been used for LA, Lewiston-Auburn 911. And my feeling is based on my own experience with the Cumberland County Regional Communications Center and the work that I have done in this area, as well as the responses that have been received from other agencies, 911 agencies, that the formula that we have now really is not fair and equitable, and that we should have an independent analysis done. I've talked with Ed Barrett about that. I believe he agrees with that. And I think that's probably the best course of action for the city to follow. And in conjunction with that analysis, the city of Auburn could also look at, if this partnership doesn't continue, what that would look like. But I think most importantly is an independent analysis to determine if there should be a different funding formula. The funding formulas for the majority of agencies that were looked at are based on population and per capita. And that is not what we're doing now. So I would highly recommend that we do this study. There's also money for police motorcycles for $18,000. The police chief will speak about that. And a replacement of our cruiser camera system, which from my discussions with the police chief, is a system that is aged, and we're having difficulty in getting parts. And you'll hear the police chief talk about that. And then the Boys and Girls Club needs a roof replacement. We have a long history with the Boys and Girls Club. That's a building that is the responsibility of the city that we own, and they need a replacement. Historically, we have supported these types of facility improvements to the building, and we enjoy a good relationship with the Boys and Girls Club. I think we should do that roof replacement. And then there's money for assessing electric vehicle, which you will hear about during the budget workshops. Next, we have the fire truck. The council is well aware of that, and the mayor. The other evening, you approved the final appropriation on that so that we can order the fire truck. It'll take probably about a year for the fire truck to get here. Fire chief, I think, has done a really good job with his team in working on that issue. There's also a request for a fire hose replacement, which would be $20,000 in bonding. You'll hear the fire chief speak about that. And the extrication equipment replacement for $50,000. Also an ambulance replacement, which will come from the EMS capital reserve in the amount of $263,000. And then cardiac monitors for $30,000, which will come from the EMS capital reserve as well. Bill, next slide. Thank you. Then we have the road work that we need to do. We're all well aware that there's never enough funding to be able to keep up with the work that needs to be done to maintain the roads. And last year we got behind because of the investment that we had to make in Lewiston-Auburn 911 by going to a new radio system. And right now we're trying to play catch up. And this is still not going to put us where we'd all like to be, but it certainly will be a big step forward. There's 2.1 million, over 2.1 million for reconstruction, 1.2 million for reclamation, major drainage, 500,000, MDOT match, 900,000. Dan Goyette, the Public Works Director, will talk about all of this and what the MDOT match money means. We've done very well in terms of getting funding from the MDOT. Dan is the Vice Chair of the Androscoggin Transportation Resource Center, does a really good job representing the city. And I look forward to hearing the presentation and discussion on those items. And resurfacing for $1 million. And then we have some equipment that also has been requested. This is not the beginning list that Dan had. I asked him to prioritize the equipment, and this is the list that he gave me. And you'll see 250,000 7-yard plow trucks and 12-yard plow trucks, 244,000, 1-ton trucks, 120,000. A replacement of a bucket truck, 175,000. Sidewalk plow equipment, 16,000, and pipe camera, 13,000. Again, Dan will talk about this when he gives his presentation, which will be on April 16th, and he'll be able to get into more of the details with you then. And then there's finally a skid steer sweeper attachment for 9,000. And then there's money also to finish off some of the internal improvements that need to be made with the senior center. The senior center, as you know, has been well received by the community. We've been very fortunate to have the federal funding that we were able to utilize. And the 75,000 would go towards the purchase of some items for the kitchen, and also for the audiovisual system that we want to have in the senior center, which I think will be well utilized and a good investment. And I'm sorry, I hear a question. And then there's city clerk records restoration for 20,000. The city clerk, we'll talk about this evening. In the need for that. There's actually a statute that requires us to do this, and we have a lot of work that needs to be done. We're chipping away at it every year, and she will talk about that later this evening. For neighborhoods, we have dangerous building demolition for 100,000. And we have unspent monies of about 200,000. So that'll give us 300,000 that we could utilize for an aggressive building demolition program. And then for building acquisition, which is that comes under our building acquisition comprehensive plan initiatives for the CIP, there's 100,000 in bonding. And similar to the dangerous building demolition line item, there's also 200,000 unspent funding there. So that gives you a total of 300,000 for building acquisitions and perhaps other items. That is something that I think we should do. It's important that we do this. We need to have an aggressive approach on it. Part of my responsibility is to try and put forward a budget that will help improve the city, improve the future fortunes of the city, but is also realistic, that we can accomplish, that we will be able to accomplish with the staff capacity that we have and the resources that are available. And I think that will be ambitious, but I think that's something that we could do. And then under prioritized transportation and connectivity, we have the Auburn Lewiston Airport for 50,000 bonding for a foam request that came from the airport director, which the airport director will speak about when he presents his budget, which will be next Monday. And then also the parking apron for 400,000. The rail study is something that the mayor and I have been involved in to some extent, and you've heard me talk about, and that is to try and do I'm going to call it funding feasibility on trying to attract rail to the Auburn Lewiston area. The legislature has approved an economic impact study, which Representative Betty Ann Sheets was very instrumental in. Governors has signed it and approved it, which is going to allow us to really dig into what would be the funding feasibility, the economic impact of connecting the Downeaster to Lewiston-Auburn. If you look at it, go ahead.
This, just to back up, this $50,000 rail study is for the intermodal facility and freight rail, not passenger, correct? That was the budget.
No, this has to do with the discussions that we've had, Mayor, with Mayor Kayer, Ed Barrett, and also the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
Um,
But this is not about the freight. This is about passenger rail.
Correct. This is about passenger rail. Yeah. So, and it's an exciting possibility. And I think the key issue here is what would be the funding obligation on the part of the city of Auburn. And the idea behind the economic impact study is to try and examine that. And it's interesting when you think about what's going on right now at the federal level with the stimulus funding that's being provided. That may actually provide an opportunity for us to be able to get more funding than we might normally. So this would be our local match, and we may not need it actually.
Well, we've never discussed a local match or contribution to a finite level. I just want to be clear. In all my conversations, we've discussed a lot, but never putting a dollar amount onto a local match. So this portion is new to me. I thought this, as was described, as a freight. So I want to make sure that I don't either endorse nor not endorse this.
Let me remind you, when we had those discussions with Shanna Cox and Mayor Kayer and Ed Barrett, what she talked about, what Betty and Sheet said was there was going to be a three-part formula. There was going to be 100,000 that was going to come from the state legislature, 100,000 from another entity, and then 100,000 from the local communities. That's why the 50,000 is in there. But because of what's going on now with the federal stimulus money that's coming and the other federal money, we may not need this. I put this in as a placeholder in the event that we do, because from my perspective, I think this is an opportunity for Lewiston-Auburn. That's why it's there.
Yeah, and again, just said that's on the city manager's prerogative to do so. I'm not saying that I endorse this or so. I just want to make sure that's clear that my silence is not a way of endorsement or not endorsement for that matter.
Yep. No, that's fine. The next items that we have under prioritized.
May I ask a question before we move on? Is there a call number? Because my lights are flickering. And
is there
a call-in number, conference call-in number?
It's in the invite on the bottom of the invite. There is. I'm having the same issues too. I think we're getting some power surging in Auburn.
Does anybody see that? The call-in number? Can they just, if you can see it, can you just let us know?
Yeah, it should be on your invite, Holly. On the bottom portion of your invite is an alternate dial-in number.
Okay.
Just so that we don't open that up to the public, Kelsey can send you that in a chat, so you'll all have it.
Yeah, I think we lost Holly.
Hope not.
No, it is, and mine was flickering too. I have battery backup, but I might have to dial in as well. We're probably on the same grid. But I think continue, Peter.
Okay. The next item is Minot Avenue South Goff Street redevelopment for $125,000. That's with TIF monies. You've heard some discussion about that already from Michael Chammings. And then the bus replacement of $50,000, which is an annual authorization that is done. The city of Lewiston is doing the same thing. That's for the LATC bus system. And there are engineering projects in downtown parking and walkability, also under public services and infrastructure strategy. So it's interesting to see from a strategic plan perspective, the number of CIP items that are connected to our strategic plan. I think this will be strategic plan is going to be a good document for you to use going forward. But you can also see that, there's a strategic plan, and then there's the reality of trying to run a city, and certainly public services and infrastructure is a major part of what we do. Then we have schools and education. Capital improvement recommendation by me there is $1 million. The request was a little over 1.3 million. And pedestrian environment, I've already talked about that. That has to do with downtown parking and walkability, which is included within the downtown strategy. So there is some overlap between the strategies on some of these CIP items. There is no funding in the CIP for the communications plan, but as you'll hear later this evening, and I think you're already aware of having reviewed the budget, is there is a recommendation by me to do a reorganization by moving 2 people from IT into the city manager's office to form a community outreach division, which would be headed up by our communications manager, public information officer, Liz Allen. I'll speak about that when I present the city manager's budget. And then under arts, history, culture, recreation, environment, you have the Pettingill Field renovations for $100,000. I would say that this is in keeping with the sports tourism plan that was done, report that was provided to the city, and certainly is consistent with the direction that we're headed as a city to try and have more events that are related to sports tourism. Also, there's a recommendation on the Ingersoll facility, which is a great success, as you all know, for a mezzanine viewing area. I know there have been some questions about it, which I appreciate, and those will be addressed during the presentation by Recreation and Sports Tourism Director Mark Goslin on April 16th. And then the RO water treatment system for $35,000 will also be addressed by Mark, and the portable stage for $75,000. That's to enable us to keep doing the events that we've been doing in partnership with a private entity. And Mark will talk about that when he does his presentation. I think it keeps us moving in a positive direction in terms of what we're trying to do with sports tourism. This virus will go away, folks, and we need to be in a position to be able to move forward as a city, to continue to be successful in the different areas that are strengths of the city. And I think recreation and sports tourism is certainly one of those areas, and the different events that we do. Thank you very much. There will be budget workshops with the department directors, as I mentioned, beginning tonight, and then on April 13th and 16th, followed by council budget discussions on April 27th and May 4th, with a CIP adoption on May 18th. Look forward to hearing the presentations and the discussion that takes place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, on this one. As we move into, I know for a fact that the council has a host of different questions on individual items. Considering the challenges we have on the Zoom conference call, I'd like to recommend, if we could, during the budget presentations by the department heads, if they have a short preamble to lead in the discussion, and then turn into an opt-in where they're available for any questions that the council have on line items with regards to CIP or operating budget. That way we can probably move the conversation along more efficiently. It would be, considering time and the difficulties here at this point, that might, especially today, that might be a good exercise. First, and more, because I guarantee you that, city clerk, for example, based upon my consolidation of questions from council, there's only a couple. There's multiple line items in her budget. If Sue could answer the 1 to 2 clarifying questions, I think we can move ahead. And as a reminder to the council, we're not here to debate the merits or pros and cons within our group of these individual operation or CIP items. We're here to gather information so that we all can make proper decisions as we go along in this process. Does that make sense, Peter, to you and to the council?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I just, want to reiterate what I've said before. What the department directors are going to do, and you'll hear it this evening, and you can judge for yourself and give me some feedback. They're just going to focus on what are the changes in their department budgets, which is going to be pretty narrow.
That would work.
And give you an opportunity to be able to ask questions.
Okay, very good. As long as the narrow focus versus line item by line item probably wouldn't be necessary, but if they focus on those changes, And then, of course, any questions that might not be covered.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And council, are we in agreement that tonight's about asking questions, gathering as much as intelligence as possible, and not openly debating the merits of any individual line item?
Yep, sounds good.
Very good. Great. Peter, turn it over to your first department head.
Okay. I think that is going to be Sue. Sue Clements-Hilaire, where are you? Sue, are you on?
Kelsey will be bringing her in.
For her audio to
All
connect.
right. All right.
And Phil, if you could help Holly, I've tried to send her contact information via text. I believe her email is down.
Working on the same thing.
Great. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Hello?
Hello, Sue.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. I will keep this brief. Drivers of the budget are salaries, obviously, and elections. The cost of elections vary depending on the number of elections and the type of elections. For FY21, we have 2 elections scheduled. The November election, which is the presidential election, and then in June of 21, we will have a school budget election and potentially a state referendum election. The election covers cost of the election staff, equipment, supplies. For November, we have a good turnout for the presidential election, so we will have to fully staff that election. In June, there will be minimal staffing. The equipment, it covers the cost of the lease of the tabulating machines, it covers programming, and one change in this budget, I have requested $6,000 for a trailer, which would be used to store the election equipment. Currently, well, as you know from the department tours, we don't have the space at Auburn Hall to store the equipment. So currently it's being stored at the rec department. There have been a lot of changes. It gets moved from one location to another. And some items have turned up missing. And a couple of things have actually been damaged. So, excuse me. By doing this, it would actually be more efficient for the public works staff. They would be able to just hook up to the trailer and take it to the polling places, whereas now they have to drive over to the rec department, load the equipment into the van, which they borrow from the rec department, go to the polling places, set up, and then do the same when they return the equipment. This way, we know that the equipment would be stored in one location. It would be safe. It would be secure. So that is that's why I've included that in my budget. Also, in the CIP, I have requested $20,000 for record restoration. The city does have a statutory obligation to protect and preserve its records. In 2018, I did receive an estimate from a cool file, and based on the records that we have, to protect them or to restore those records, it would be approximately $600,000. So last year I received $20,000. I was able to restore several books. The picture that you see right now, that is one of the older books that we had restored. The bottom picture is how it looked after the restoration, and it cost about $900 to get that book restored. And it actually does align with this strategic plan recommendation to invest in arts, history, culture, recreation, and entertainment. That's it.
So if I could ask one question, do we have, how many years of records will be able to digitally restore with the CIP allotment that you're requesting?
The records go back to the 1800s. That
Right.
book that you saw, I believe that was from, I want to say 1856.
So how many? So 20,000 will help restore 5 years worth of records.
Oh, no, probably 10 books. We would probably be able to restore 10 books.
And it's a book a year, correct?
A book, no, last year I was able to restore about approximately 10 books.
No, I know, but each book represents.
No, we have birth records, we have marriage records, street records. So it's not necessarily a book a year.
Okay, but when we say the term book, that is
So,
like.
yeah, there are some books that run, maybe 4 years. It could be
Okay.
council records that runs the span of 4 or 5 years.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was trying to get at. I was just trying to figure out approximately how many years we were going to be able to back up or restore.
Sure.
Council, is there any questions for Sue?
How often do you use them old books?
And do you have to refer to them?
Yeah.
We get requests all the time for people to do genealogy research and that sort of thing. Street records, we go back and look up street records frequently.
Is the data that's in those books electronically backed up?
The ones that I get restored, they are.
Okay.
Do we have to maintain hard copies of those books, or would digital backup be enough?
We have to maintain the hard copies. Anything that's in our possession, any records that we have an obligation to preserve those records.
So we could, once they're restored, we could sort of put them into as almost like a museum piece that we've got it, but use the electronic records for any sort of requests at that point. Is that how you do it?
We could, but we usually go to the hard copy.
Okay.
Another question, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Of course.
We're asking for 28,186, and last year we had 32,000. How did you happen to go down on that?
Are you referring to the election?
Yeah, the ward clerks and others.
We had 3 elections for FY20.
Municipal was a third, Leroy.
We had the presidential primary, the November election, municipal election, and then the June election that's scheduled.
We have less scheduled this year coming than we did last year or in
Right.
the year we're in?
Right,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I have a quick question as well about that. So if we didn't have schools as polling locations, would that line item for school security go away if we were to use public buildings? Or is that still built into it security wise?
Not planning on having security at Auburn Hall. I do that because there were concerns having the schools as a polling place, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this the appropriate format, Peter and Sue, to discuss polling places at this point? Because they do have a budgetary impact. And that will be segue off from Councilor McLeod's comment.
I think it's appropriate to bring it up.
Sue, would you like to just kind of give a brief overview on this too? Is there, tie it into the budget a little bit, I think, again, what Councilor McLeod was alluding to with regards to number of polling places, location?
Well, I would certainly love to be able to consolidate to one polling place. Even if we were able to reduce the number of polling places, I think it would be more efficient. Like I said during the orientation, it's very difficult for a staff of 3 full-time employees to man 7 locations. It wouldn't be a huge savings as far as staffing. There would be a savings for sure, but it would be more efficient. And if we had one polling place staff would be able to be present at the polling place. So if any issues came up, we would be there. We would be able to oversee the paperwork that's being done. There would be less error.
Counselors, are you kind of give me a head nod here in favor of scheduling this for the next 30 days or so? A workshop, a brief workshop to discuss an alternate or several alternate voting scenarios that do not include the public schools?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. Mr. Manager, could we possibly schedule that for a meeting coming up?
Yeah, Sue, does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay. I think it's something that probably needs to be moved on. I know we've been talking about it for years. It's come up. It's failed for whatever reasons. I think it's time to reevaluate that, especially in light of school security and what we have going on in the disruptions that have been made very clear by our friends over the school committee and department about this.
I do want to add, though, that I would not be in favor of consolidating or doing anything before the presidential election. I think it's too soon, and it's too big of an election. I would be in favor of doing something after the presidential.
Then if that's the case, I think we need to push off the workshop. It doesn't take it's not urgent then, and I'll definitely rely upon Sue's expertise in elections more so than mine. So I think we could deprioritize that to maybe this summer. Okay. Or at least post budget season, Sue and Peter.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, Sue.
You're welcome.
All right. The city manager's budget is next for the city manager's office. Again, similar to what I said before, our focus is making Auburn one of the best small cities in America. Our strategic planning process helped identify recommendations to accomplish this goal, and the work that we do every day certainly, I think, is a good example of that. We have a few changes, and I will say this. In the years that I've been responsible for presenting budgets as county manager or city manager, I never had a year where I thought there was a budget that was business as usual. Budgets are challenging. Certainly this one is no exception. We have some things in this budget that I think are innovative. The idea of transferring 2 positions from IT into the city manager's office for communications community engagement division, I think is to try and improve the communications that we have as a city, which was certainly discussed during the strategic planning process extensively and was one of the strategic plan recommendations. And when I say improve the communications, I mean internally and externally. We're very fortunate to have Liz Allen as our communications manager, public information officer. But we think by bringing together the Great Falls TV station manager and also our geographic information officer to this division, that will help strengthen what we're doing and add some synergy so that we can be even more effective in terms of the work that we're doing on communications, which I think helps set us apart from other municipalities, certainly other cities similar to our size in the state of Maine. Another change on the next slide, Phil, please, is in the general account. There are 2 changes. One you've heard me talk about, and this is certainly unconventional, and that's $60,000 in the city budget to hire a professional fundraiser for the new high school project. It could be in the school's budget. I know the school budget is challenging. We need to raise money for the new high school project to try and offset the burden on the property taxpayer. I don't think it's realistic to expect that any superintendent is going to be able to do that effort. So that's what this money is for. And then the other money is to provide IT repairs to GIS equipment that is in the IT budget.
Peter, can you say the amounts as you're going through each, because I can't see the slide?
Sure. It's 7,500 on the IT equipment. And it was 60,000 for the professional fundraiser. And Phil, do you want to go back to the first slide on the positions? For the geographic information officer, and again, this is a transfer. So this is no fiscal impact. It's just moving it from IT into the city manager's budget. That's $64,945 for the geographic information officer and $48,613 for the Great Falls TV station manager. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And then under the professional services account, there's a transfer of $13,000 from marketing and the economic community development office into this account that would be under this new community outreach division. And also 5,000 that will be added for marketing. I can't emphasize enough the great job that was done on marketing for the 150th anniversary of the city. And I want to give credit to the mayor and the role that he played in terms of trying to attract funding for that. And the events that we're having, we are finding ourselves in a position where we need to promote events like the kickoff that we had at the beginning of the year with New Year's. That's the second year in a row that we have held that event. This year was even bigger and better than last year. And I expect that'll continue. So this is what that funding would be for, to try and promote the city, to try and make people aware of what a great city Auburn is, and the opportunity for people to be able to come here for events and hopefully also move here. And also have their businesses here. And then there's a transfer of $3,000 from the IT budget for continued professional development for the geographic information officer. As you can appreciate, things are always changing in the technology world, and particularly GIS. So it's important that we're on the cutting edge of that. And you've seen the work that has been done from the past few weeks with the coronavirus situation, with the hub that's been set up, and some of the other mapping that has been done. Rosemary Mosher has done an outstanding job with that, and we want to be able to continue to stay on the cutting edge with what we're doing and do an even better job. That's it for the city manager's office budget. I'm happy to answer any more questions if anybody has them.
I'd like to open it up to the council. Let me just make that screen bigger if I could. Hold on one second, council. Council, any questions? Start off with Holly, because she can't raise her hand. Well, she could raise her hand, but nobody would know. Holly, do you have any direct questions to the city manager?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm sorry that I'm not able to see the slides, but I have notes that I made for the whole CIP. And again, this question, why is the city manager's budget so much bigger than last year?
I just explained it.
Yeah,
The
I didn't
You're
hear it.
referring to the transfer?
The transfer of funds, okay, the transfer of funds from IT, the transfer of the two positions, the transfer of IT for equipment repair, for training, the 60,000 for the professional fundraiser. If you take away those changes, the increase to the city manager's office budget is between 4 to 5%.
Okay, that's what I need to know. I missed the beginning of the explanation. Thank you.
Any other? Okay, council. Okay, Councilor Boss.
Sure. Mr. Manager, you might have already explained this and I missed it, but can you explain the theory behind having the development staff person for the school building coming out of the city manager's budget?
I was just concerned that it wouldn't happen at all, Councilor Boss, to be honest with you. And I knew that the tight budget that the school department had to work with because of the decrease in the state subsidy, which frankly is due to the fact that we're succeeding with what we're doing. Our valuation went up. There are fewer disadvantaged students in the school system, and that had a definite impact on the state subsidy that the school system received.
Which
I just-
the decrease in their increase.
Yes, a decrease in their increase.
Okay.
A decrease,
Not a decrease.
I think last year the decrease was, the increase was 1.5 million. This year,
Yeah.
this year, and Katie could clarify that, and this year the increase is less than 400,000. So I believe, anyway, I think we need to have a fundraiser to help us with that. The goal of the previous council was, I think 3 to 5 million that would be raised in the community. And I've participated in some of the discussions on fundraising, and I know that there has been some work done, but I also know that we haven't been able to generate a lot of new money for the fundraising efforts. So I think we need to think about what would be the benefit of bringing in a professional fundraiser. If we could bring in a professional fundraiser, whether it's in my budget, school department budget, for 60,000, and maybe have to provide some incentive for that person, and we could raise $1 million or even more than that, I think that certainly would be the return on investment that we want to have, that ROI that Mayor Levesque talks about. I think that's the approach that I'm taking.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a huge project, and I think having a professional development person on it would be very valuable. Is there opportunity to also have that staff person work on municipal grant prospecting or other work, or would it be just solely for the school building?
I'll tell you, I was thinking about the school project in the new high school, but maybe you could use it to do some things on the municipal side as well. But I was really thinking that 60,000 would be for the new high school project. And I was just trying to have a placeholder so there would be money available to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Lasagna, you had another follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was in those meetings too with the building committee when this discussion happened, and we were pretty much told that this was not going to be a problem, that they were working on it, that the superintendent and a group was working on this. So I'm really disappointed that this is the point we've gotten to. It may be necessary because this has to happen. We were told, and we told the community that we were going to reduce the tax, by raising this money, 3 to 5 million. I was skeptical, and I mentioned it in those meetings, but everybody said that they thought it was going to be possible to do. And then when I saw some of the fundraising efforts, I was really disappointed. So I will just put that out there. I think we need to do it because it's really important, but I'm disappointed at how we came to this conclusion. Thank you.
Is there any other counselors that would like to comment or have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to comment. I disagree with the 60,000 to start with. I think the school department, if they need that or want people to help them, they should be asking for that help. They had promised a lot in the last 2 years, this past year, and I don't think they've done half what they said they were going to do. Going back to what Mrs. Lasagna just said to us. So I don't think they've stand up and done half of what they predicted they would do. And I want you to know, Mr. Manager, that we have plenty of businesses in this city that may not ever open again. And if they do open, they'll only open at half speed. And I don't know where all these increases that you think that we're going to be able to pay for these. So I want you to know up front that we need to hold this budget to exactly where it was last year with no raises given to people, and let them understand that we need to bite the bullet this year. No, just, well, we'll negotiate this, negotiate that, and maybe we can do it. We need to tell them point blank, either we hold the line or we find a way of laying people off and go back to what we were 10 years ago. That's the way I see this. And if people don't understand we're in a hurting situation for the next 6 months, I think they got blindfolds on, because I think we need help. So either we hold it where it is, or as counselors, we ask for a 7% cut in this budget.
Counselor Walker,
That gives people something to think about.
and Counselor Walker, and I'm not going to disagree or agree with you at all, but I do, as part of the schedule, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, we need to ask the questions. We need to fully understand all the line items and how they impact the city, short-term and long-term. And then we need to make action. And we take action during the first reading and the second reading through motions and amendments to the budget. We do it every year. Every council does it to a certain degree. So I'd like to, for the sake of time and process, keep focusing on the questions, asking for backup now, justification, if that's okay with everybody.
Mayor, just a quick comment. And I respect and admire Council Walker. I spent a lot of time with him the last 3 years, and he was on the council when I was hired. And in fact, he's the only counselor that was on the council when I was hired. So I appreciate that relationship. This municipal budget, city side, is a net increase of 78,000 over the current budget, 4% increase. If you take out the 60,000, it's only 18,000. So we've worked really hard. With the help of the assistant city manager and department directors, we reduced the original request by over 500,000. So I understand what you're saying, and as the mayor said, we'll have more time to talk about these things. My main concern is to ensure that when the virus is gone, that the city government is in a position to be able to continue to be as successful as we have been the past 3 years, and to be able to move forward and to help with the recovery in the community. But I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
If I could ask a question, please, Mr. Manager. I'm looking at your under line item PS or PS General. You mentioned, I think it is cumulatively an $18,000 media budget. Am I correct on that?
Well, there's 13,000 that was transferred from the Economic and Community Development Office.
Okay.
And 5,000 increase.
And if I, so. Okay.
It's 5,000, a net increase of 5,000.
So 18,000 total budget though?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, very good then. So if I could ask pre our vote on this budget, if you could have your potential new department head kind of rough out a concept, a media plan on how that money would be expended. Do not go deep, obviously, into vendor selection, but brand, timing, support, and so forth. I think to understand how that money is being spent is going to help the council understand if that's a good amount or if it should be raised or lowered.
Good question, fair question.
I just happen to have a little bit of background in media, so you kind of expected that one to come.
Yes, you do.
One quick question. I want to make sure I'm clear. What did you said, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir.
Your increase from last year to this year was a little under 4%, but that's $1.54 million, correct?
Are you talking about the city manager's budget, or are you talking about the overall budget?
The overall budget.
The overall budget, there's a net increase of 78,000 overall, the whole city budget. On the city.
So the tax levy.
Direct services. Direct services by the city government. The net increase is 78,000.
That would be passed down, Steve, Councilor Mills, that'd be passed down through an increase of 4 cents on the mill rate and the tax levy.
Correct. Yep. That's right.
But the budget is substantially higher, to be clear, and for everybody watching, the budget is substantially higher than it was last year. We have just received additional revenue streams, and primarily in the form of an additional state aid amount of roughly 900,000.
Yeah, the budget is, it's off the top of my head, but the overall budget for the city's direct services is about 1.5 million or so above the existing budget. But again, I've talked about this before, but you've got fixed costs that add up to about 900,000 or $1 million or more that are part of that. So
that's state aid of 900,000 that's offsetting?
Yes, non-tax revenue. We have non-tax revenue that is offsetting the increased expenditures. So the net increase is 78,000.
So that if we didn't spend that 900,000, then that could be gone as a tax rebate to the taxpayers. Is that correct?
Well, the 900,000 you're talking about, are you talking about on the non-tax revenue side?
I'm asking you about the 900,000 that you said is offsetting the increase in the budget.
That 900,000 is part of the revenue section, the non-tax revenues in the budget.
Mhm.
And the 900,000 that I'm thinking of in my head right now is municipal revenue sharing that we get from the state. We've increased that by about 900,000. We actually could have gone up more than that, but we're trying to be conservative because we don't know what's going to happen with the state's revenues, and that which may impact municipal revenue sharing. So the 900,000 I'm thinking of is from municipal revenue sharing.
If I could rephrase the question, Councilor Milks, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I think what Councilor Milks is saying that we do not have to apply the additional state revenue share towards expenditures, but we could use that money in theory to roll back the budget, thereby decreasing the tax levy or the mill rate.
You're using that revenue to decrease the tax levy already.
No, but I'm saying this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
If we froze all spending and expenditures the same as they were last year, I'm in no way proposing this.
Yep.
But if we did, in theory, with an increase in state revenue share of 900,000 through a variety of different channels, you could apply that to the budget and hence decrease or roll back the mill rate for the residents and businesses of Auburn.
You could, but you'd put the city in a difficult spot. I know that.
I'm not arguing for it or against. I'm just trying to answer Councilor Milks. Did I answer your question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was my question.
Yep. Okay, very good.
You would. I'd like to have a discussion about that at some point if you're serious.
We're not, I mean, that's not a proposal. It's just, interrogatory.
As I understand, the goal of this is to be informational and not discuss the merits of line items.
All right.
Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree a lot with what Councilor Walker says about how we're handling this budget. We're handling the budget, but we have no crisis. We do have a crisis. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what we're going to have to do to give a shot in the arm to our businesses that
Councilor Gary, this is about interrogatories on line items.
Right.
Versus general statements and direction, because we're not going to get there.
Oh, I agree with that part of it. But I'm trying to make a point that it's not business as usual. And if we can save money by lowering the budget, that'll give us more money to put a shot in the arm to our businesses and our community as a whole. And I don't think we should have to wait till the first reading to make amendments to this budget. Because how else are departments going to be able to absorb whatever we decide that we don't think that they actually need?
Well, Councilor Gary, the only way we can make any type of amendment or motion is through an oral motion on a resolve or order, in this case, a line item order. Once the budget is introduced, the only way we can make anything by charter, ain't my rule, ain't the city's manager's rule, by charter is through that process. And that's why, we haven't historically in budget seasons in the past, and I don't want to go down that road too much. It will happen. Go towards large overviews and trying to convince folks of a certain pathway before we have all the information, if that makes sense. And I think it's just proper. It's a proper way to conduct a meeting. It's not. I mean, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with you. I'm just saying this is the time that we need to ask all the department heads about specifics, so we can look at the pros and cons or the merits of each line item later on.
Oh, definitely. But I've been off and on the council for the last 20 years, and we've had budget discussions where we thought we should be before the first reading of the budget.
Yep, and that was the councils in the past, and I'm going to save all my judgment for past councils, good or bad, probably more to the bad. So this is a new council with new folks, and this is a new way of going at it. It's going to be an efficient process. Councilor McLeod?
Thank you. Mr. Manager, I just had a question about dues and subscriptions.
Yes.
Are those rolled is that software that is utilized by the entire city, or is that your department only?
That's my department only.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And follow up with what Mr. McLeod requested. I see that line item in many of the departments. So each different department has a different, in other words, each department has a different list.
Depending on,
Okay.
depending on which department. That's right.
Some of those budgets, for example, I'll give you one that honestly it's in there right now. Please confirm this, Peter. It is subscription to the Mayor's Coalition.
Correct.
$3,700 a year. It's a work group, lobbying group made up of mayors from around the state that work on legislative issues, very much in tandem or parallel with the Maine Municipal Association. Those dues, I believe, are in the range of 25,000 for our municipality size. It's significantly, but I'm looking at the effectiveness of the Mayor's Coalition specifically. Do not be surprised if I make a recommendation for us not to become a member or keep our membership with that organization going forward. It's something that we weren't a member of before. We've given it 2 years. And I'm currently, in this current crisis, weighing the pros and cons of having a membership in that organization. If that kind of helps Councilor McLeod shed a little light on some of the reasons for it. I will say MMA, extremely important. If we're not a member of MMA, we might as well just succeed and be part of New Hampshire.
Yes,
So-
and it's over, I think it's 25,000, 26,000 to belong to the MMA, Maine Municipal Association.
Yeah, my question was more about if we had a larger subscription base and that we were breaking it down into the individual line items for each department, similar to like, office suite software type stuff. If that was broken down into everybody's department, or we had one big massive license, that type of question.
I can tell you, Derek Belanger is our purchasing agent, takes advantage of every opportunity to do that. Dues don't work that way, as you know. But whenever he can, he will try to get the best deal that he can with a group purchase. And we do that.
Is there any more questions on the city manager budget? City manager doesn't have any CIP items per se.
No, I do not.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Well, I believe we can move on now. Obviously, we reserve the right to call you back, Peter, to testify.
I wouldn't want to miss that.
So we'll move on to county tax.
Jill is going to present this portion. Jill Eastman, the finance director for the city.
I believe we lost Jill to a power outage.
No way. Seriously?
It would seem so. We also lost Sue. Thankfully, she's already given her.
All right.
Yeah, this is a rolling outage.
Well, I will substitute for Jill. Okay. The county tax, you can see that the increase there is 147,000 or so, about 150,000. We cannot change that. That's the increased assessment on the city of Auburn. The debt service, the increase there is the interest on the debt service. And emergency reserves, the emergency reserves fund is something we have to have by charter. And our auditor would not be happy with this if we didn't have it. And actually, the charter prescribes the amount that we need to have. And there's a formula to that. So that's the explanation on the county tax, debt service, and the emergency reserve. The emergency reserve is the account that we use, for example, for the small business loan program that we ramped up in 3 days to the credit of the Economic Community Development Office. That was a suggestion, recommendation of the mayor, which council approved, supported wholeheartedly. That has been very successful. The money for that small loan business program came from the emergency reserves account. That's for unanticipated expenditures and situations like we're in right now. You never know when you might need to have funding from that account.
So, Mr. Manager, if I could ask, total amount in the emergency reserves fund as of right now, not including this potential allocation?
Right now, what's in it? Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
I can't tell you the amount today. I don't have those numbers in front of me. Jill probably could tell you. It's I'd have to look that up. I can get back to you with that, or Jill can.
And a little bit, if we could get a little bit more detail on the definition of emergency and appropriate uses. If this is an emergency, it is an emergency, but is it appropriate to A, not fund, or B, draw down?
It's not. By charter, we have to have the account.
But I'd imagine that we have to have the account, but I imagine in an emergency, the money is there to use.
Correct.
That's why we put it away. So
Yeah.
what qualifies as an appropriate use of that fund? To what extent can we draw down on it? And do we have to replenish at a certain time post-emergency? In other words, if we're in an emergency, and do we keep funding it, or do we fund it and then draw back down? And I'm not recommending that we do that, but I think we all need to know for this budget and next budget what a little bit more about that account.
Right. What are our legal requirements? I guess yeah. And is it fair to say that nothing on here is discretionary at all? We have no choice on any of these numbers?
Yeah, I believe those numbers are really set by the charter and financial management of the city. So I'll give you some answers to your questions. I'll talk to Jill about it and we'll get back to you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. All right.
I lost power here, so I lost my internet, but I'm on my phone. And you're talking emergency reserve account?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
That account is set by the charter, and it's the minimum amount of it is 0.5 of 1% of the total budgetary expenditures. That's what it's supposed to be. That's the minimum.
What's in the account right now without assuming this contribution?
It lapses every year into the fund balance if we don't use it.
So basically it goes into emergency reserve account. If we don't have an emergency, she rolls into fund balance for an emergency.
At the end of the year.
For an emergency.
Well, we use fund balance every year to offset the tax, to keep the mill rate low. We have been. So that ends up being what happens with it.
How much are we using the fund balance this year, Peter? I know it's in here somewhere.
Yeah, as I recall, Jill, it's about 500,000 or so. Is that right?
Yes.
So what does that remain in our fund balance then? And I know we had an auditor presentation earlier this year. I just can't remember.
Yeah, at the end of the year, any unexpended money lapses into fund balance. Any over, if we have revenues that come in over budget, those go into the fund balance.
I see the line item here under revenues for this year's fiscal year budget. Manager proposed budget is using $425,000 out of the fund balance, which is a decrease from the last fiscal year of $102,000.
Right, we shouldn't be using any, actually.
Well, why do we have a fund balance?
Where I'm trying to get.
We have a fund balance for emergencies, though, correct?
Yes, but we shouldn't be using it to fund the budget. If we were going to use it, it would be more. The recommendation would be to use it for one-time, like a one-time purchase or something like that, rather than to offset the mill rate.
Okay.
That's in a ideal world.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think, Jill, you would agree that the practice by municipalities and counties across this country is to utilize their fund balance to help offset the impact on the property taxpayer.
That's how it's been.
Yeah. How much do you use? It's normal practice. The question is, how much do you use? And we've been trying to whittle that down. And it's challenging, particularly in difficult economic times. Our fund balance.
You did whittle it down, but I'm also looking at several different things here. As a council, as we've been talking, we've given strong direction on Monday night to the school committee to not use more than 20% of their fund balance as of today, in order to keep that in reserves, because we're not sure how our economic situation will be post-pandemic. I would feel remiss if we did not have the same policy internally or something close. To me, in my, regardless of what other municipalities do, I find that I can't support that. In other words, I can't ask someone else to do something that we're not willing to do ourselves.
Well, I don't want to get into a discussion about asking the school department to do that, but
No, we already did. It's already done. They've been asked to resolve, was voted on unanimously. Now I'm looking at what the city budget, the municipal side, what is our total amount in our fund balance? And are we drawing down in excess of 20%?
there's
No,
a
we're not.
practical way of running city government, a realistic way, and then there's a way that could
The right way.
manage.
Peter, I'm not gonna sit here and argue. It's not time for a debate like if instructed. We need to ask these questions though, because as we're getting asked questions, we need to have at least thoughtful answers. And very well, everybody could agree that the way it has been done historically is the right way, but I need to ask those questions. And I think the council needs to hear it. I think the school committee does too. So what is our current total fund balance right now, Jill?
The unreserved or unreserved fund balance was at the end of June last year, which is what we go by, the June 30 date, was about $9.5 billion.
Okay. And so this $425,000 drawdown is, I'm doing really quick, that's 5%, not even 5%.
No.
Okay. So it's less than or five, call it less than 5 or equal to 5% fund balance with a line item in our budget per charter to reimburse that much money and then some into that emergency reserve, which will then flow into the fund balance.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Now I can at least, if we have a comparison with the school department asking them to not spend more than 20%, I can in good faith say the city is not spending more than 5%.
It got brought up today.
It did. So are all the counselors understanding how we kind of came up to that number? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much. I just needed to drill down to that a little bit more.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could, or
please.
So on the same sense, if we had a zero budget 1 year to the next and we drew down that 425,000, that could be put towards the taxpayer's mill rate, correct? On a zero budget situation, conceivably. I'm not suggesting we do that, but I'm suggesting that that's the potential.
I just need to remind you that the city has a policy that they passed, the council passed, about how much fund balance we are supposed to have. And unless you may want to think about changing that, because we're trying to get back to where the policy says we're supposed to be, which is 12.5%. And we're at about 9.5%. So I just want to remind you of that.
We've been increasing that the last 3 years, right?
Yes, we were down to 6.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, they got it down to 6.
If council's good with this, I think this is something that we can, I don't want to say table, but we need to bring up too. I want to review the minutes from the meeting when the auditors presented and their PowerPoint. We asked some specific questions about how we compared with other municipalities around the state with regards to our fund balance as a percentage. And they gave some pretty good answers. And I think it's probably worth re-looking at in this situation. You agree? Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Brian, Kate, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, so let's Steve, that's a great point. Let's bring this up. Thank you, Holly. I got you. So we'll do a little bit more research offline over the next few days and see if we can bring this up during one of our meetings over the next month. Okay.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Jill.
Yep.
Thank you, Jill.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Manager? Next.
Yes, Michael Chamings is going to present this with his team on the Economic Community Development Department. Michael, are you on?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm having a couple of technical difficulties and I can't pull up some of my details, so I'll defer to Eric on some of the details. I can see a couple of you right now and a couple of you are fading out. So our department's a little bit unique, as you know. We're almost revenue neutral, except for our electricity. We pay for electricity bill in the city. This year is $145,000. But because of our TIF funds, our CDBG funds, and our permit fees, we pretty much come close to breaking even on that. So we're going to start out with a slide showing the operating expenses. Keep in mind I don't have control of these slides, and I don't have some of the details in front of me, so Eric will hopefully be able to chime in. I don't see his name up here yet. Hopefully he's getting connected. So looking at now, our department proposed totals up 1.5%, and the manager's total shows 0.4%. And if you see the difference, 1,339 and 1,353, there are some shifts in the budget. The electricity is down, but some of our repairs for lights and street lights and equipment is up in the electrical. And as the city manager mentioned before, there was a shift from our marketing over to his department, and that is almost the difference between the two budgets there. So right now you see the salaries, the top 5 expenses make up 94% of a budget. Salaries, which a lot of that's MSEA contract salary increases. The electricity, which is down as we get those prices from the department through Derek and the purchasing. And purchase services is down 19%. Dues and subscriptions are slightly up, and our capital operating is down slightly. So the purchase service breakdown is we have 15,000 for GIS support, and Eric should have the details on that. Marketing support is 16. Cooperating agencies is Auburn Business Development Corporation, Lewiston Auburn Rail, people that we do support for. We have raised that over the last couple of years. And that is just to pick up some support from some of these cooperating agencies. We spend $2,500 a year that goes to his Top Gun program, $1,000 to Build Maine, and $500 to business trade show. So in the and also what was shifted into the capital this year, the capital operating breakdown that kind of gets shifted from CIP is $6,500 for a dig-safe cable locator, $16,000, $16,900 to relamp traffic signal LEDs, and $6,000 traffic signal preemptions to upgrade the preemptions on the systems for the public safety. So that, I think, I apologize, I don't have, this is hopefully the first and last time I work from home to do this. So if we can move to the next sheet, you can see the revenues, which aren't showing the TIF related reimbursement. Our permits, fire alarm and other services, 199,500. CDBG reimbursement services, 214,430. And we have the permits. I don't know. This year we've had so many strong years. We've set the bar high with the permit fees coming in. This year it's showing a little bit lower, but we have coming up in the planning board probably $20 million worth of projects going. So we're in some uncertain times, but our office is still at full steam ahead. And so we're very proud of our staff who've been keeping up with this. So we do anticipate some larger permit fees coming in. And at some point in time in the near future, we've talked about this, we would like to look at adjusting our fees for commercial permits that come more in line with the rest of the state. And we've discussed that. We don't want to be the highest. We don't want to be the lowest. We also think that we can make up some of these revenues. As you know, we pick up some of the delegated authority from the state. So a lot of times when we're doing permit fees, they're getting the permits through us a lot cheaper than they are in other municipalities when they have to go to the state through DOT and DEP. So there's a proposed permit fee adjustment. That's what that is. If we can move to the next slide, I don't have these in front of me, I apologize. Then again, showing the decrease in PS General, the bulk of that being the shift of the marketing, where half of that goes over to sports tourism. That was actually, I talked to the city manager about that. I felt that the budgets, the money amounts in these budgets should reflect into the budgets of the departments that are utilizing them. So last year, if you look at our budget, we shifted that over to that department anyways, but that should be showing as actual expenses to those budgets. And then again, the electricity is down. As you know, we get better electricity prices and street lights that we discussed earlier. So we've picked up, I think, 1,000 street lights that the city now owns. And so you are going to see an increase in traffic, street light repair and replacement and such, even though we have a lot of new equipment. And capital operating, 29,600 shows it down. And then again, that was shifted over into another section of the budget, which I don't have right in front of me. I apologize. So we have another slide up here. I guess not.
No, we have
Oh,
new
there we
Auburn
go.
Village Center revitalization, Michael, in front of us.
Yeah, thank you. I just got that. So the capital expenses, then again, what you're looking at are these capital expenditures, all of these that you're seeing in front of you, make sure I'm saying this correctly, 1, 2, 3. These expenses come from TIF funds against program developments, meaning these were set up years ago. These funds have to be spent in certain areas. So the new Auburn Village Center revitalization, the downtown parking and walkability in the Minot Avenue, South Goff Street redevelopment, none of this comes from property taxation as an appropriation. It comes from those funds. So new Auburn Village Center revitalization, if you see this year, we probably have right now $469,066.98 in there, and we're adding 100,000 into that account. We are going into the second phase coming up with the walkway, the garage around Raleigh's, and the Second Street expansion. And then in the future, we're going to need to deal with the social club. They're working down there as we speak and tearing that up, getting ready to pave and put some curbings in the road in there and moving forward in that. The downtown parking and walkability, that is the sidewalks to parking. Last year we funded that. We did pick up some parking that we purchased out of those funds by the library, and we also used some of those funds for the part of the study in that area for engineering. Minot Avenue and South Goff Street redevelopment, those monies were budgeted several years ago, probably 7, 8 years ago, and they were reutilized. So those funds are the area behind the Lund Sweat building, which encompasses the walkway also going up to the school, which we have to look at with the new project, the lighting and the sidewalks in that area. So that is pretty much just putting those funds back into that. As you know, we were looking at a larger project that we're still working on that I actually spoke with the developers yesterday. And that's another project that one of the local engineers is working on too. The rail study that was brought up earlier by the city manager, the passenger rail, the dangerous building demolition, junkyard cleanup, is 100,000 bond, I believe, in there. Currently, we have roughly 235,000. 100,000 obviously would give us roughly 335,000. We currently have 2 active junkyard cases we're working on. and 2 at 30 to 50,000. The worst case is 100,000. We've recognized 5 homes that may need to be demolished at roughly 30,000, gives us 150,000. So that there's 250 of that, which right now that would put us at 335, would give us about an $85,000 shock absorber in there. We don't know when some of these buildings come up, when these junkyards come up. The building on the end of Hutchins Road, the big mill that was out there, that came to us. We hadn't funded for that. We actually got it for less than 80,000 to take it down. Second high bid on that was roughly $150,000. So we do like to have some sort of shock absorber in that. So this year, if we are aggressive program, we could finish up the 2 junkyards, which we've been working on the last several years, and they're coming to fruition now, and 5 homes at roughly 30,000. The asbestos removal from these homes what drives up the cost that we cannot predict those costs on that. The comprehensive plan implementation and acquisition, that's for and update. That's intended, as you know, we're looking at modifying and updating the comprehensive plan. That's not the 100,000 total. That's just part of that. The acquisitions on that can include New Auburn, Great Falls area, walkability. So that comprehensive plan used to be funded with a lot more money in the past. If you try to implement everything in that policy, it'd be millions of dollars. But that also, that fund, having monies in there, as you go into the future and you're looking at the comprehensive plan against the strategic plan, that gives you some funds. So when you prioritize that you can do those projects in next year's budget. Great Falls Plaza Vision, that's 100,000 gone. The city manager touched on that a little while ago. Also, we've been working with Tom Platts. It slowed down a little bit because of what happened with the economy and the environment recently. So we are looking at how that needs to be designed out there. And obviously we've been looking at changing the drainage, which is going to be a large cost in the future. But that pretty much is, we try to put a larger amount in last year. Tom Platts met with us to discuss the future out there, but it's in a strategic plan, and it's kind of a central portion of our downtown and our build out in the vision of that downtown area. And evidently Derek is up next.
Well, you're not off the hook yet. Don't run away, Michael. Okay, very good. I'm going to open this up. We touched upon your operations budget, Michael, and then obviously you ended up with a CIP. I'll open up the council. Do you have any questions? I'm going to turn to Councilor Lasagna first because she's on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I just want to touch on 3 things. Thank you for the descriptions, Mr. Chairman. One, the rail study. I am curious about how we justify that at this point. The other thing is the comprehensive plan program for $250,000. That's a lot of money for things that we're not sure that we'll be doing yet, and I would much rather see a specific plan for that. And finally, just Great Falls Plaza. I'm sorry I have to take up this time, but it's easier for me to do it this way. The Great Falls Plaza vision. I'm also questioning that because I feel that we set aside this money, but there is no anchor business. There is no complete buy-in, I don't think, from Mr. Platts on this until we do that. So those are the 3 things that I would like to hear more justification for. Thank you.
Well, they're all good points. The rail study was initiated, as you know, the discussion was brought up between the mayors and the city managers. That's for the passenger rail coming in to have a matching fund. And I haven't seen the legislation, but I believe there may have been some legislation that's going to require that, but I'm not sure. And so that really, it's a good place to put in our budget because of planning and development, but it really isn't a project we've been tackling. We've been tackling more the freight rail in the intermodal facility. And so this project is the passengers has been